Hello, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar on automating financial operations, how to build better SaaS. My name is Daniel Greiller. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Weavr, and I'm incredibly excited to be joined by two eminently qualified guests to talk about this topic. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now. First of all, Riya, CEO of Sequence. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Thanks, Daniel. Great to be here. I'm Riya Grover. I'm the CEO at Sequence. Sequence is a modern quote-to-cash platform for B2B finance teams. We help fast-growing teams to automate and streamline their quoting, billing, invoicing, and revenue collection.
Brilliant. Thank you, Riya. Really appreciate you joining us today. And Sabrina.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina, CFO here at Omnea. At Omnea, we are a procurement, orchestration and automation platform. So we help making buying stuff easier. We particularly help larger businesses in kind of the mid-market and the enterprise space, but we work with a number of scale-ups as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sabrina. Great. Let's get straight into it. This might sound like a dry topic, but I think it's one that's incredibly important in terms of strategic efficiency. So what would you say are the key operational inefficiencies that B2B SaaS companies are facing today, and how can financial automation address those pain points? And Riya, do you want to come in on this first, please?
Yeah, of course. I think very, very exciting topic. We're obviously playing across this quote-to-cash space, and we see a ton of operational inefficiency across these sort of core financial operations on the revenue side, these billing, invoicing, revenue recognition, revenue reporting workflows. And I think for me, it really comes down to a couple of things, why we're seeing these inefficiencies. One is, I think we see data sitting in multiple systems. And so there's really no unified source of truth for kind of revenue data across the customer lifecycle. But because these things are sitting in different systems, you also have this problem of kind of teams working in silos and not working from a sort of unified data source. And so, for example, sales teams assigning sales contracts, which finance teams are responsible for to bill and invoice for, and often actually they're working from different sources of truth, and that creates a huge amount of kind of manual intervention required to take those terms and kind of bill and invoice accurately for them. I think, often you'll see kind of teams working in different systems and working from kind of different sources of truth. And so this is really something where automation and more streamlining of that workflow, orchestrating that data correctly across the workflow can really help to increase accuracy and efficiency, stop people kind of doing duplicative tasks across that workflow. I think, I guess another point to add on the financial automation piece is I think we're starting to really see AI's footprint kind of starting to emerge. So on things like contract extraction, automatically taking sales contract terms and pulling them into structured data into the financial systems, anomaly detection, making sure that you're not incorrectly billing or invoicing customers or missing revenue, customized payment reminders. This has kind of historically been a very manual, inefficient task run by finance teams, where now you're able to build kind of much more automated, customized payment reminder workflows. And then I think we'll talk more about this kind of as we go, but just much more, once you have that kind of proper system of record and source of truth, you're able to have much smarter surfacing of actual revenue insights. Also very excited about kind of LLMs and agentic capabilities in this space. I think, core premise of an agent is an additional team member executing tasks on your behalf. And I think we're really starting to see meaningful opportunities to do that. I talked about contract extraction as being one, but invoice preparation and issuance, ERP general adjustments, and I'm particularly excited about this because I think you have lots of agents that access APIs or public databases, which are valuable, but when an agent or has really kind of access to this proprietary workflow context and data, that's just a lot more powerful and can actually really kind of help perform these sort of customized, specialized tasks within that software. So again, I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
I couldn't agree more. The silos thing is one that I'm embarrassed to admit I've seen in organizations that I've been in, and as a sales leader, I've probably created inefficiencies myself. Sabrina, anything to add on that?
Yeah, and I think the challenge with silos is always the handoff, and really it's not even always the handoff of the data. A lot of the time it's a handoff of context as well. And I think once you marry this to the reality that it kind of, well, it does matter a bit how large or small you are as a business. There are exemptions for smaller businesses relative to larger or public businesses, but there is like a base level of compliance and control that is just expected by default, regardless of business size. And especially even if you're a small business working with more mature businesses, those expectations of that level of compliance and control you inherit from like your larger counterparties.
Yeah.
So you see like this real challenge where even very small businesses have what feel like very oversized compliance burdens, and in order to kind of process those effectively and to understand where you should be spending your time and where it's not worth spending your time, you need a lot of context. And this is where silos are really, really difficult to understand. Obviously, a lot of the things that happen in sales have huge impacts on revenue recognition, financial planning and analysis, kind of being able to sort of strategically drive the growth of your business. But especially as teams grow and as people specialize and as roles specialize, having to kind of orchestrate that context handoff is actually just as much of a pain as orchestrating the data handoff and making sure that the data is clean. And these are some of the challenges that I think, the next wave of, let's call them like AI enabled financial software will be better placed to help handle. And I say AI enabled rather than necessarily in all cases agentic software, because the reality is like the auditor or like the regulator is not going to accept AI said it was okay.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be a healthy balance between very deterministic old school controls whereby there is like, checkboxes are there for a reason sometimes. There's an audit log, a human has reviewed it, etc., whilst leveraging AI to often help with some of that context handoff, and to help with some of the more subjective areas of financial analysis. FP&A is particularly ripe for this. I think this is where some of the great opportunities can come from, because it's very natural that as businesses grow and as the number of people you have grow, that roles become more specialized. Like it does tend to lead to certain levels of expertise and efficiency, but it does make the handoff problem a very real one.
I think, Sabrina, you made an interesting point of like, it's not just the data handover that matters, it's the context. And actually, I think this is where like the UI of software it's really important, because as that context is being transferred, there are certain decision points that a human operator might need to make. There are certain things they need to understand about the data that's being handed over. Like just to kind of, like one example of that we see is like, if somebody does an upsell, for example, how that is co-termed. Like there's a bunch of decision nodes that will happen between, the salesperson upselling that agreement and then how the finance operator is going to take that upsell and how it impacts sort of the downstream operations that they have. And I think really good kind of UX, UI can help make that kind of handover and those decision nodes that have to happen at the point of that handover really seamless. And I know, Sabrina, for you guys at Omnea, it's a similar thing, right? Like people, one team might make a purchase request, but then there's a bunch of other decision nodes that need to happen to determine actually how that data is orchestrated and how it impacts things that are happening downstream of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I would just jump in on that that UX and UI piece is really, really important, because we talk about data and the opportunities that tools like LLMs give us with more data. There is still the point of capturing the data in the first place. And that is, I think, often overlooked. And especially those of us who are financy types, kind of systems thinkers, very logical. We like rules, we like policies, we like things to be nice and structured and set up. But there is like a real meaningful trade-off between the complexity of what you're trying to capture, the user experience of the capture of that data, and the adoption. If you make it so painful for a rep to get that deal closed in the way you want it, they will find a way to close a deal in some other system. They'll not do it on DocuSign, they'll print it, they'll email it to someone, they'll get them to paper sign it. Having like a great consumer grade user experience that makes it easy to capture the data is the other really important piece, because all of these things we're talking about, single source of truth, being able to leverage data for insights, it requires that you get the data. And if you think of it as like an equation, you have like the strength of your policy, which might be like from 0 to 100%. And then you have like the adoption of that policy, like how much is that actually used, another 0 to 100%. You have the 100% policy and the 0% adoption of it, 0% outcome. You are not capturing those insights.
Totally. I actually think
yeah,
on this kind of upstream data capture point, it's really interesting, because I think a lot of the last wave of like players in the financial operations stack sort of overlooked this piece a little bit. It was like, okay, let's focus on the rigor of the financial operations we can perform, but actually if you miss the ability to like really seamlessly, perfectly capture that upstream data, which is basically the critical data that informs all the downstream operations, like frankly, like the hurdle to actually to get it there is it creates so much friction and is so error prone that you actually don't have very streamlined financial operations downstream of it. I think where you're seeing a lot of the kind of new wave of players really focus and leverage LLMs is in that, like, creating, as you said, that consumer grade experience on upstream data capture. And LLMs are great for that, right? They provide a great wedge in to sort of capture some source of truth upstream that then bears relevance all the way through the downstream workflow. And actually think it's a very core part of our strategy as well. Meet companies where they are, make it so effortless for users to to either input that data or for us to extract that data from where they're already inputting it, and then have a right essentially to own the operations that follow from that data downstream.
So I think these 2 points you've made, let's move them on to almost like a real world example, right? So I'm a revenue leader, right? We've talked about revenue recognition. We've talked about, I mean, Sabrina, I especially like the way you talked about having all of the policy, but none of the implementation. I often say, part of something's better than all of nothing, right? So and obviously what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive both as high as we can. So can you give me some real world examples of how automating financial processes like payments and pricing models can be more than just cost saving measures, but actually true growth levers? And Sabrina, do you want to come in first on this one?
Yeah, and remember that it's easy sometimes to focus on the dollar cost of what you're spending there, but time is an investment. As a CFO, I think of the investments in my business not just in terms of like literally the cash that comes in and out, but also where time is being spent. And we hire, for the most part, like smart, capable people, and it is painful to have them doing really dumb, stupid work, right? Like, it's heartbreaking sometimes to see these things, and that is time spent on that is time that is not being spent on the growth drivers of the business. I am an accountant. I'm not sure I would like identify as an accountant. It's not like the first thing that I usually offer out there in terms of my identity, but I respect like the need to have accurate financial books and data. But that is like a retrospective practice of recording something that has already happened. And in the grand scheme of what's best for the business, you need that to help inform the future, but you need to have that energy to be future looking. Historical data is great for that in terms of like being able to create trends, by being able to automate financial processes that allow you, with whatever sensible level of investment makes sense for your business, to spend on the control and the recording side of things. You're able to capture more granular, better information that then is that fuel that then helps drive actual growth levers. If I can get financial processes to take less time, procurement processes to take less time, and then that also gives me a better granularity of data, I can then use that to focus in on, cool, here are like the 3 big opportunities that we have in the business right now.
Love it. Riya, do you want to add anything?
I think your question was sort of how does automating these financial processes like payments and pricing models actually kind of act as a lever for growth. It's really interesting, actually. We have, I think, some really great examples from our customers who have automated, processes around pricing and billing, where they can actually kind of tangibly point to like meaningful uplift in revenue and growth, and give us sort of, frankly, like direct kind of numbers around some of that uplift. We actually had one of our customers say that they expect to achieve an extra $1 million in unlocked revenue over the next 4 quarters, because they're now able to kind of automatically charge prorated overages for user upgrades during the month. They have a seat-based pricing model, and that's really hard to achieve if you're doing it manually, especially when you've got different customers on different pricing and contracts, to be able to understand how changes in user behavior should immediately prompt changes in your revenue collection manually in real time is kind of almost impossible to achieve. So here's an interesting example of where automation and kind of better tooling and infrastructure is able to actually immediately give you kind of unlock revenue from you for the pricing model that you're deploying. And I think this is an interesting point because we're seeing suddenly like companies adopt more complex, more hybrid pricing models. So we're gone from the days where it was most companies, B2B SaaS companies, were just using kind of standard subscription pricing. We do see a lot of adoption of usage-based pricing, hybrid pricing models, mix of usage and subscription, and actually some new models emerging as well amongst especially AI players, like outcome-based and skill-based pricing. All of this needs infrastructure to track how usage is changing and actually measure and bill for that accurately. And so I think we strive to have a really tangible impact on revenue uplift and growth for users just by virtue of having automation in that part of the stack. And I think, Sabrina, you made a really interesting point about how like accurate data, like reliable, accurate, good data unlocks the ability to do far more in a finance function. And yeah, again, one of the things we really strive to do is give companies a proper source of truth on revenue data, like particularly in the context if they're usage-based and they have this kind of variable component to their revenue. Having access to that, like understanding what that revenue actually looks like in real time and understanding revenue trends, obviously allows you to be much more strategic on both pricing decisions, revenue forecasting, and just really understanding your growth. And so I think that is a very strong kind of byproduct of automation, because once companies have that data in place, all of a sudden things like creating reporting for the board or actually doing some strategic analysis on forecasting revenue trends and understanding how usage makes revenue vary become tasks that are kind of much easier to conduct. And I think that's a really sort of powerful byproduct, in addition to obviously the cost saving and frankly the ability to move people, really smart people, from doing manual repetitive things to much kind of higher value things. It's
interesting because bringing the data in order to enable it is is definitely something we've seen, but also speaking for Weavr, a lot of our customers also bringing the financial services in as well, because then you are literally in control of the activity of the usage that's happening. So it makes there's more things for you to automate if you're also automating the activity to make the payment, the activity to collect the money, right? So that drives another automation. It's another growth lever, because not only are you not having the wastage, right? You're not having the unbilled activity, but actually also that's a value-added activity that you can charge for as well.
I'm really excited, I think, by this kind of concept of actionable data. So there's one thing to have a clean, clear source of truth, but actually I think software can play a really key role in pushing the right data to like other systems of record where that data can become actionable. So for us, for example, we see, like, let's say, a customer's usage has changed dramatically, or they're seeing a big step up in the number of seats that they're adopting. Actually, that can push an actionable task into a CRM for an account manager to actually action something with that account, or think about how that influences a renewal. And I think for a long time, a lot of software platforms took the approach of like, okay, great, we hold a ton of data, but like you come into our platform to access it, like where are the source of truth? And I think you can really still be a source of truth, but take a very proactive stance on not just like enabling people to access that data via API, but like actually enabling them to build workflows that pushes that data into the core systems of record those other teams are already using.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. You talked about creating a task, right? How, in your experience, can financial automation enhance the customer experience, right? And why is that important for a SaaS company? If they're trying to be the best in their field, they're trying to differentiate in a crowded market. You gave the example there of kind of actionable data, but how does this automation result in a better customer experience? Sabrina, I think you're probably well placed to go first on this.
Yeah, I think generally most functions in a business have the place that they live, right? The tool that, to Ria's point, the tool in which they primarily work. So in finance, it's probably an ERP. At Omnea, we're building kind of the OS for procurement teams. A HR team has the HRIS. What else? CS teams may have something like a Gainsight. There are all of these tools that is geared towards making that particular function's role and day-to-day and operations better. And the challenge is that like a business, there is no one tool that is correct for the entire business, that is like the full business OS. Maybe in another 10 years, maybe someone will go and build that. And to Ria's point, there is this challenge that I think in the past, kind of prior to sort of this kind of automation and orchestration journey, it's been like a bit of a battle of everyone saying, no, but I am the source of truth.
Yeah.
And I think, respecting, making what your tools team needs to do really seamless and easy, while respecting the fact that you are not the primary tool for your secondary users, I think is really, really key. And being able to not just pull, but also push information to the right system at the right point in time. And so I think, whilst we have, all of these best of breed function specific tools, the very best ones do speak to the rest of the ecosystem. And I think that's really, really key in creating that consumer grade experience that we've spoken about before, that drives adoption, that drives data capture. And the benefit of that via orchestration is that data capture can then be shared across all of these best of breed tools, as opposed to creating competing sources of truth. We are not yet at the point where we can take humans out of the running of business. So we have to work around the realities of working with human beings who, I would say, at least over the next 10 years, I still expect that to be a very significant part of the workforce, even if we start to get agentic colleagues in our companies. And that does mean working around realities of human behavior. Context switching is painful, like in terms of cognitive load. Familiarity with systems, and systems are getting generally more powerful and more complex. It can be quite hard to be a master in Gainsight and Salesforce and HubSpot and all of these things. Like, people are naturally more inclined to specialize in one of these, and making that an easier experience, I think, is really key. I think the other part is that just expectations generally of the current wave of SaaS businesses have definitely increased. The requirement to become more of a platform earlier, I think, is something that wasn't true 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you're sort of launching your second product or module short of like 20, 50 million in ARR, investors are like, whoa, don't split your energy distraction way too early. Whereas now it's almost like a day one expectation that everything does a lot more. And I think these do create a better consumer experience when done well. But it does require that everyone adopt kind of an attitude of kind of playing nice, of sharing data and creating more of a moat through orchestration and experience, and ultimately outcomes that you're delivering for those teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think on your question of, how do you build better experiences for the end customer, like, whilst obviously the software that we're building is directed at internal teams and helping them drive their efficiencies, I think just kind of reiterating this point Sabrina made of, if you can have really kind of a single unified clear source of truth, and that is pushed across systems where people are working, it basically means every team can work much faster and respond to customers and engage with customers in like in a more efficient manner. And like, ultimately that is the edge that a startup has, relative to an incumbent, the ability to engage with a customer, in sort of near real time. And like, just as an example of that, if a customer is overdue on a payment, like the right customized communications to that customer. If for example, if a customer stopped using the product, sending that usage signal to an account manager so that they can have a conversation with that customer, not at the point at which, they're long gone past it, but actually at the point at which it's actually happened. Like, to be able to have all of these signals, to understand the customer, it does require, information from the financial systems, from the product analytics systems, from all of these different systems that might be adopted in the across the business. And if you can actually have a sort of, I guess, a system set up where that data is being really seamlessly shared to the right places, I think it just empowers you to give customers a much better experience. And I guess on our side as well, like when we think about customer experiences, obviously one of the things we're empowering B2B companies to do is to give their customers much more streamlined purchase experiences. So, historically you've seen in the e-commerce world, or, in the sort of self-serve B2C world, consumers expect one-click payment and checkout experiences. It's, unfathomable to think that you've got to go and, type some stuff in. You expect to just be able to buy something in a couple of clicks. And as we tackle the revenue side of the B2B world, it really looks very different in many cases. Just the process of getting like order forms signed, or sending out invoices and expecting kind of manual bank transfers. There's a ton of potential like digitization improvement in kind of quality of experience that the end customer can experience even in a sales-led B2B workflow, which is something that we're really trying to tackle, and kind of help our customers achieve a way kind of more delightful experience for their end customer that they're selling to, in the way in which they share a quote or an order form, in the way in which they send an invoice to then be paid, in the way that they notify the customer that they've received payment on the invoice, or give them kind of optionality on how to pay that invoice.
I think the example of one-click checkout is actually a great example, right? if you think back sort of 10 years ago, it used to be a case that you would go to a payment page on a website and fill in all your details, and it was a different website, right? So you clicked and you jumped, right? And I think to the point about the consumer experience, we're all way past that. Like I love my Amazon checkout, click one button. Right? I also love like Stripe products when Stripe is deployed at multiple different online businesses, and because I put my details in before, I can use it again. And I think there's certainly where embedded finance comes in, that there's an opportunity for that to go further, because yes, it's about systems playing well with each other, but it's also about what pieces can you bring inside, right? So can you bring the source of truth from, currently it's outside, my bank is over there, can I put it inside the software so that actually there's an amount of money in there and I can just click the button to pay the invoice, rather than having to go to a website and go to the bank account and fill in all the details. And I think maybe that's, I would see that as a competitive advantage, a strategic advantage, the collapsing of multiple different propositions into one place. So maybe to turn that question around, what strategic advantages have you seen from B2B SaaS that leverage automation and orchestration really well? Sabrina, do you want to? Oh, sorry, Riya, you were going to go. Riya, why don't you?
Sabrina, do you want to go?
Okay, yeah, sure. I think a lot of it is around, one, it allows you to rebalance your investments like slightly differently to like how you might have needed to do it before. But the other thing is that, creating a superior user experience like really is a competitive advantage, and that works on two dimensions that we've spoken about a couple of times already. Dimension one is people are more likely to buy products they actually enjoy using, and that like have like a reputation for being enjoyable to use. But then like the second dimension again is that you will get increased usage if your tool is more usable in that way. So all of the things that we've spoken about, they kind of really nicely touch both that top and bottom line, in that, by being more delightful, it should have a positive impact on things such as, your win rate, your reputation in market, your inbounds, your hit like the top line in terms of how much value you're providing, how much you're able to charge in return, as well as also creating greater efficiencies that reduce the cost side of things as well. And yeah, I think this is one of those very foundational things that, when done well, unlocks a lot of other things further downstream. And I think, a lot of people get very excited about some of the downstream things without getting kind of these foundations right. But I think it's this kind of very foundational layer that, is probably not the single biggest needle mover for your business, but it creates those opportunities for those lots and lots of like incremental improvements that really do compound and add up over time, especially in kind of fast growing businesses where the requirement to build a brand in like a relatively short time frame is also really important. The thing about, whether it's a more modern kind of usage or outcome based approach, or whether it's kind of your more traditional B2B SaaS, all of these business models rely on repeat revenue, right? Even if it's usage, even if it's outcome based, all of these businesses, if they're kind of, VC backed, there is an implicit assumption that it is worth the relatively high cost of early capture, because whatever format that revenue stream is in, it's going to be like a long-term revenue stream.
Yeah, sticky.
And, a lot of people really zero in on, the sales and the selling part of that. The adoption and the renewal part of that is also really, really important. And it is a massive strategic advantage to effectively have a longer lifetime of customer, which does correlate to their satisfaction with the product. So all of these things, they are and can be strategic advantages. It's sometimes hard for people to focus on getting these things right early, because they are the advantage that pays you back when the initial 1-2 year term expires. The data advantage is something that you're not going to necessarily be able to reap the rewards from until you reach a certain level of scale, but they are things that become very hard to fix later in the day. So I think, especially for those of us in relatively senior positions, yes, you've got to make sure the short term works, because if you can't get to the longer term, what's the point? But you do have to have that one eye on what the longer term looks like, and what are the sources of advantage you're going to need then, and how do you set them up well today to be able to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, highly concur with kind of everything you just said. I think especially as like a relatively small company competing against 20-year-old giants, the biggest advantage you have on your side is your agility, your ability to kind of quickly adapt to changes, new competitive customer expectations, new pricing, launch new product lines if you need to, and also just stay maniacally focused on building great product and servicing customers and in the best possible way with high responsiveness. I think if these are the things that you really want to focus on, getting your foundational infrastructure right as a team with as much automation and orchestration as you can is just so powerful, because you can really, really ensure you renew focus on these things that really, really matter, to enable you to win and outcompete, as opposed to spending a ton of time doing things that actually just don't move the needle for the business. I think when we think about helping companies, orchestration and automation are big words, and they're kind of buzzwordy in many ways. And a younger team might say, well, actually, we don't need to focus on that, right? We're focused on our sales process, or we're focused on the things that really matter. But actually, if you can operate with really high efficiency, every time you close that sale, you can make sure your, all of your operations around that are perfectly conducted, or that you're paying your invoices perfectly on time, and you're running your business as this really efficient kind of machine. I think then you interface way better with the customer on kind of all aspects of how you operate, because just everybody is operating with this high degree of efficiency, but also I think the data that you have, again, big word, many younger teams will say actually it's not that important to have really clean kind of sources of truth on some of these things, it doesn't matter at this stage. But actually having good data, I think, just again enables you to operate with this high degree of precision and speed with your customers, which ultimately allow you to strategically outcompete. And so it's imperative that mid-market and enterprise customers put in place efficiency, automation, orchestration. They have to at their scale. But I actually think even earlier in the life cycle, companies that can get some of these workflows right, put in place the right software to actually just enable them to operate really efficiently, just kind of massive advantages in just being able to kind of outcompete, out-deliver for their customers as they grow.
It's interesting. It's the sort of thing that you really see when it's not there, right? As in, if you don't have the automation, then suddenly what you're used to in previous parts of your career being a 5-minute job becomes a 15, 20, 25-minute job, and you remember that, right? You were talking earlier about, can you delight your customers? If your software is actually causing pain for your customers, even if it's in one small area of it, that's the bit they're going to focus on. So not having that automation, not having the orchestration of everything being available at your fingertips is something that people just don't have time for in this day and age. Going back to the whole idea of a consumer experience, it's not okay to drop the ball in that regard. I don't think, anyway.
You also only have so many team members, right? You're trying to grow really fast with a with limited resource and time, and therefore again, you've got to be like militant about the use of that time and where it goes.
So we've talked about, there was a phrase I think that Sabrina used earlier, was actionable. So Riya, I think you said actionable insights earlier. I don't want to misquote anyone, but Riya, you were talking about actionable insights earlier. So let's maybe, can we think of a real world example, right? So you've got automation generating this huge amount of additional data. Okay, so how can B2B SaaS companies turn that data into actionable insights that actually inform pricing strategies and actually enable them to drive growth? And Riya, seeing as I almost misquoted, I'm going to have to let you go first on that one.
Yeah, I think we've covered a bit of it already, but we obviously, by virtue of covering the quoting, pricing, billing, invoicing workflow, capture a lot of data points across the revenue life cycle, right from what pricing is shared with what customer to how their revenue is trending, how usage of that product is trending, if they're using usage-based pricing. And all of this data has huge strategic value across the business. Obviously to finance teams, because finance teams have to conduct these operations like recognizing revenue and kind of closing the books, but also because they're forecasting revenue and they're thinking strategically about growth in the business. But it also obviously has huge amounts of strategic value to other teams in the business, like sales teams, account management teams, actually product teams as well. And so I guess really what I meant by my point of actionable data was being able to, yes, of course, like view it and understand it in the system of record that we have, but also enable teams to build the right workflows, the right notifications to surface that data to actually inform tasks or actions that might be taken elsewhere in the business. So like even as simple as, somebody signed a contract with these products, we need to switch on feature entitlements against those specific products, or somebody's not paying their invoice down the line. It's now been 3 invoices that are unpaid. Actually, we might need to inform somebody in the business to switch off feature access to something because this is happening. Or like, frankly, somebody is, as I said, adding a lot more seats or adding, using the product more than expected. Can we talk to them about actually going up a tier? And these signals, I think, like truthfully, if these processes are run manually, these signals are often missed in the business, and means that like you really do miss out on revenue, you miss out on engagement opportunities with customers, you actually kind of miss the opportunity to improve your pricing. And these are like critical growth levers in the business. So I think data is important, but like surfacing the data in the right place, in the right way to inform actions. And again, LLMs are potentially really powerful for these kinds of things, like as a sort of co-pilot experience, being able to surface the right data to somebody when they need it, in the place that they're working. And that might be Slack, that might be their ERP, that might be their CRM. It might be a data warehouse because they're leveraging a third-party BI tool. It's not for us to be like highly intentional about where they're working, but to make sure that the right team is getting the right information. And actually on that point, the other thing that I think is really interesting is like not all teams care about the same information in the same way, in the same places. So allowing an element of kind of custom workflow building to allow teams to surface information in the way that they want to, I think is a really powerful thing. And truthfully, I think we see it in some software, but we don't see it enough. And there's really an opportunity for kind of every software you use to do that more to enable you to do that more proactively.
Sabrina, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add, except that I would just, for the avoidance of doubt, call out that, this is still true even if you don't have a complex pricing model. Obviously, if you are usage-based or outcome-based, these insights are more critical in kind of real time. But even if you are the most bog standard, we do a recurring fixed amount for like XYZ a year, even having these insights on, you have data on the drivers of ROI for your business user that show that you've demonstrated you've delivered more value, less value. These can even, inform things such as your ability to do like your inflationary increase next year. All of the contracts have, up to X, Y, Z%. You don't have to have a complex model for these data points to be really powerful. If you're looking across and you're saying, hey, this whole segment is just not seeing massive value from our product, it may actually be damaging to try and do a price increase right now versus, whoa, this segment is getting massive ROI from the product. We could go to the top end of our allowable price increases. I think, whilst I think pricing models are becoming more complex, these are data points that are really valuable, even if you have the simplest pricing model out there.
I couldn't agree more. And I think where also the importance of like actionable data at the right time comes in is when like it's not just about pricing, it's also about kind of commercial levers and what the way contracts are structured. So for example, very often you might have an implementation period or a free trial period, and that as a result, actually your contract is renewal is 13 months out as opposed or 15 months out as opposed to 12 months out. And it's very reasonable that like actually, well, no, not very reasonable. It's actually quite likely in many companies who don't have this kind of infrastructure or like proper data orchestration in place, that they might just kind of miss the opportunity to renegotiate or have a discussion because they've noted it as a 12-month contract as opposed to thinking about that 15-month milestone. Or like you have a renewal happening, and actually commonly, like sometimes, people won't even look at the last contract that was signed a year ago and really factor in any changes or that have happened kind of through the life cycle, any upsells or add-ons, because they just don't have all of that data consolidated in one place. And therefore, like the kind of human default to kind of do things as quickly as possible and not necessarily go and search for where that information might be and kind of piece it together means that it's almost, I guess, the responsibility for the company in some ways to make that data as surfaceable and available as possible so that people are making the best informed decisions.
Yeah. One just small point to add on to that as well is that, great software as well is going to be one that, especially at scale, helps you sift the signal from the noise. There is so much data right now, right, on every little thing. There's an old joke about like, where people would create like the old quant funds, and they do like these amazing models with like 1,000 variables, and that you could always tell the day that they went live because suddenly they'd track the market perfectly. And then, like too much data in and of itself is not necessarily quote unquote a good thing. It's about also leveraging these tools to provide the right insight, not necessarily the dump of data, but the right insight from that data at the right point in time to allow you to make that decision. Your top in our procurement world, your top 5 most critical vendors are X. Like if your renewal is at Y, here is the data that you need at this point in time to be able to go and strategically renegotiate this. And that's not data that you need to be looking at literally every day on like every vendor or every contract or whatever it needs to be, but you need that prompt and that insight that is both timely and relevant and useful in order to be able to drive these outcomes.
Absolutely.
Signal to noise, I think, is one of the huge challenges of our time.
I'd say getting data to the right people is something that resonates with me. We had a situation, I don't know, 18, 24 months ago, where a couple of our customers were using the product wrong, in inverted commas, and we suddenly saw there were all these calls in the wrong part of the system. So for too long, people weren't looking at it. As soon as one of our product team looked at it, they're like, oh, I know why that is. We've been thinking about creating this feature that's going to solve that problem. Because we saw that people were having that gets bumped up the roadmap, and we bring it out faster, and we're able to drive more revenue because we have happier customers. So you're right, having data is one thing, having data in the right people and actually being able to have the right result as a result of it is another thing. But again, that comes back to where automation and efficiency comes in, right? Get the data in front of the right people by creating the workflows so that people know what's going on in different parts of the world, because there's just too much going on for us to monitor all the signals all of the time.
I think this is really a great opportunity for kind of this wave of software, because I think, again, historically, a lot of data surfacing was about like all the data available all the time. And like really I think the reality is like the most important signals are missed. I think you put it super well, Sabrina, that you totally empower and raise the operating capacity and capability of an organization if you can give people high quality data signals when they need them. Like nobody cares about a vendor contract renewal 8 months before it's going to happen. But if you miss it in the right window, like it's potentially really detrimental to your business. And I think there's also like some really interesting new UX UI patterns for how teams can actually interact with that data, not only how they can set up the workflows to showcase what data they care most about and what signals they care most about, but also ways to interact with that data that like really, really aids the human operator and aids the human workflow.
No, this has been, as I thought it would be, a really, really interesting conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. Let's maybe bring it to a close by looking forward, right? All good webinars finish by making ridiculous predictions into the future. So we're going to be no different. I'm going to do the same thing. If you look forward into 2025 and beyond, what emerging technologies, and no one will be surprised if LLMs come up because we've said it half a dozen times each in this, but what emerging technologies in automation do you think will have the most profound impact on B2B SaaS companies? And as we wrap, Sabrina, I'll let you go first, please.
Yeah, I think it is. Obviously, I look through a lot of things with like a finance lens, and I also look after the legal side of the business, so also like the compliance lens. I think we're going to see more of like a human in the loop model come through, to the point about, regulators and auditors are not going to accept the AI said it was fine as like an answer. I think we're going to start seeing, a lot of technology that kind of takes a bit of the best of both, leveraging those kinds of agentic or LLM type insights where it's appropriate, but with human oversight and control. And I think that's going to drive a really interesting new paradigm of work. I don't know if this is going to happen in 2025, but I thought we'd like bet on like over the next 5 years that a lot of particularly back office functions are going to evolve into this kind of model. We kind of saw it in security kind of over the last sort of decade that, sometimes what you want is not total automation. Like you need kind of that oversight and control, but you need it to be automation enabled. And I think that's going to become a more common model. So I think we're going to see a rise of tools that are not fully agentic, but that have selective agentic capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to kind of piggyback a little bit on that human in the loop point, I think it's really interesting, right? We're all watching and looking at kind of where the capabilities are and where we think they're going to go. And I think what we will see is that we'll have really high confidence in AI in some areas. I guess things like extraction and summarization of some data, like already there are pretty strong use cases, and you can kind of go in with a pretty high confidence level that you could have a probably like fully AI workflow in some aspects of your product. But then there are others, and especially kind of in financial operations, as Sabrina said, where the human in the loop and the right UX and the right experience to achieve that interplay between AI and human is just so it actually is really, I think, an opportunity for software to differentiate. So like, areas where there are complex judgment calls that need to be made requiring kind of deep industry expertise, situations requiring negotiation or relationship management, handling of edge cases. For example, it might be that an AI is able to make recommendations on revenue recognition and treatment for kind of how to recognize revenue with a specific contract, but actually there might be edge cases where a human wants to review those and actually kind of tick those off before just letting an AI complete something that's so critical and important from a compliance perspective. And so also very much believe in this a human in the loop one. I still think we're yet to see like the full spectrum or breadth of like different types of kind of co-pilots or user experiences around kind of AI assisting a human to emerge. Ton of room for creativity there. But I guess one thing I'm quite excited about is this notion of kind of malleable software, where if you think about it, you're building a software company, you have lots of users who have lots of specific things that they want in the product that really pertain to their own workflow or their own, a small custom requirement that they might have that actually is just really specific to their business. And historically, the kind of answer to this has been, well, it's either in roadmap or it's not. And
right.
maybe we've got some workflow engine in the product which allows you to somewhat customize your instance, but generally, like, we either deliver you the product feature or we don't. But obviously now we have kind of LLMs capable of writing code, and I think there's a pretty interesting idea around a user saying, actually, I want to have this in my instance, I want to have this in my software, and actually being able to instruct the writing of the code to modify that instance of the software that they're experiencing in a way that achieves a certain customization for them. And that might be UI customization, or it might actually be like a particular way they run the workflow. Like, as an example, I want the option to integrate, a Stripe link on every invoice versus on one, or to be able to flag it at an individual level. Maybe actually that's a customization that a customer can build. And it's a pretty loose idea, but I think this interaction generally of workflows and LLMs, kind of being a node in that workflow or providing a step in that workflow where there's high confidence, I think I'm pretty excited about kind of seeing how that plays out.
That would be really cool. And I wouldn't bet against it at all. Sky's the limit, right? But, we're pretty much at the top of time now. Sabrina, Riya, thank you so much for joining today. Really have enjoyed the conversation. So everyone watching, listening, hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone, today. Take care. Bye.
Amazing.